Welcome back to the podcast. Gabe, Giannis, and I, we are on for our weekly episode. We talk about all things family, fitness, and maybe even dabble in a little bit of business. Gabe, good morning. I got my hat backward because you do too, and it makes you look young and hip. So if you're watching this on video, that's why I'm doing it.
I don't know if you're going to keep that look.
I don't think, dude, I can't pull it off. I think that there's something to be said about some people could pull off backward hats. Other people can't. And based on the way I look in this camera right now, I can't pull it off, dude.
Can't pull it off. You're going back to it.
I want to try it, but it's not for me.
So I had mentioned this the last time we were recording, and I wanted your take on it. And so let me talk about the email first. So I got this email. I subscribe to The Hustle. I think it's a really good newsletter. And on Sundays, they send an email that's like a little bit more like involved. It usually breaks down like a single topic that's interesting. And so this email, the subject line or the title of it is "Getting a Divorce?" ? There's a coach for that. And it goes on to like essentially talk about how divorce has become so incredibly common. It even, dude, every 42 seconds, a US couple divorces, and that there's 86 divorces an hour. It has like this little chart, which is crazy if you think about it.
It's 50%, right, Gabe? Did they say that in there?
I'm not sure what the percentage is. The one thing I have heard about that, that stat that's a little skewed is that doesn't mean that 50 couples they get married. There are some couples that just like, or some people that like divorce many times. So
yeah. So if you're someone who has been divorced 4 times, you would then that counts as that number,
right? Because that counts as 4 divorces, but it's the same people. It's not that, you know, if you're married, there's a 50, but either way, divorce is super high. And I was thinking about this. So the whole email is how there's now divorce coaches. Like there's a whole industry, not of like the lawyer legal side, but of like these like life coach types that help you like handle a divorce and like, you know, how you should go about like dealing with like the ramifications of that, or just making it this like, I guess, less of a hardship and just kind of how to navigate it. And anyway, the whole reason that I was thinking about this, so if you haven't listened to the Nick Freitas episode, I highly, highly recommend going back. That was like my top 3 best episodes that we've recorded. Really enjoyed it. We touched on some really cool things. But one of the things he said was how when he got married with his wife, he was like, hey, we're burning the ships.
We're burning the boats, baby. Yeah.
You know, which like for anyone that, it was funny because I was talking to Ariel about this and I explained it, the whole burn the boats thing, because it's a reference to like back in the day when you would like go to war and you would like invade a coast, you would like burn the boats so that no one's getting back. Like we're gonna have this battle to the end. There's no retreating. There's no going back. Like we're burning the boats because like this is what we're doing, and we're either taking this beach or it's taking us, period. And having that approach to marriage and kind of how that's, you know, a lot of the things that Nick talked about is very counter to, I think, the direction culture is going. And I think this is it was a very real example to me of like one of the things that's happening, which is like this like normalization, or just like the fact that like, you know, some marriages don't work out. And if it doesn't work out, then here's like another way to make this process like, you know, not as painful, or like to navigate those waters a little bit more. So where I wanted to start the discussion is I feel like, you know, me and Ariel haven't been married for 5 years. You know, we're very new to this thing and figuring out as we go. I think you've been married for how long?
We've been married 15.
And you've known Ashley for how long?
23.
Long time, right? And I think that like I'm
it, bro. I burned the boats freshman year of high school. Like that's it.
But I'm curious to get your take on this whole thing of like, why do you think we've gotten to this point where, you know, this is something that's, you know, seen as maybe more normal than it was in the past? Like it doesn't even seem like that big of a deal anymore. You're obviously seeing more of it, like the numbers pan out that way. And is it kind of the exception now to have someone like you, right, who met your wife literally in high school, burn the boat, and like, you know, there's no going back? Like I'm curious what your thoughts are on why that mentality around marriage seems to be not the norm anymore.
I actually think we're going to have a resurgence in commitment like 10 years from now. This is my take on it. I think that, like when at our parents' age, like it was like, hey, like it was just known, like when you get married, like you're making a commitment to somebody. And then over time, it's like, people get divorced, things happen. And I'm not dismissing the fact that like sometimes people choose the wrong people and it does not work out. Or something happens in life where someone changes and you just grow apart. Like it happens. Like, and I'm not dismissing that at all. But I think that at all costs, you should try and keep that relationship strong because you made a commitment. And just like you make a commitment to a workout, or just like you make a commitment to competing in an event, you make a commitment, you do everything in your power to follow through with that. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, but you do everything in your power to follow through with it. And I think that what's happening in the last like 10 years is that you're seeing this shift where the digital age, the easier access, the easy to information to this, right? I DoorDash, I do this. I can meet a new person just by swiping left, swiping right. I saw that now online, you could get prenups built up like that are pre-made, right, for you. Or in your point, like a coach to help you with the divorce. It makes it more socially acceptable to get divorced. And although I don't necessarily think that like, if you get divorced, I don't think you should be shunned from society. That's not the case. Like, I think if you didn't work out, it didn't work out and you should move forward. But I do think there's going to be a resurgence of commitment from people because they're going to realize that a life without someone that you are committed to, I don't think is going to be as fulfilling as what you can find if you find somebody you could commit your life and do it with. Like doing life with somebody, I think people are going to realize over time is that special. I was with a gentleman last night. I'll give you a real life example. This guy at the age of 30 made enough money to start having his own private jet, right? So he was very successful at a young age, made a lot of money. And at 30 years old, he was dating, doing his thing, doing everything. Visualize a 30-year-old with private jet money and what they'd be doing. And then at one point, 5 years down the line, he went and spoke to somebody because he found that he wasn't finding fulfillment. And he knew that if he kept down that path, he would never reach fulfillment. He would never reach the things that he wanted in his life, which was a family, someone to come home to, all these different things that were important to him, but he was just chasing the next thing. So he talked to this person. He said, hey, you're in control of it. You got to make these changes. You got to stop drinking. You got to stop doing this, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Boom. The next month, because he put that in the universe, he met the right person and now he's living his best life. And so I think it's having each individual realize that like, hey, what's going to truly make you happy is probably not the next party, the next girl you're going to be with for the night. It's finding the right person and dedicating yourself to it. And I think you're going to see a resurgence of that in the next like 10 years.
It's so interesting that you say that too, because like I don't know if you've seen this, but like Dan Bilzerian's like making a comeback on podcasts.
Like, what is he coming as what? Like, yeah, I mean, I know who he is, of course.
Yeah. So, all right. So for anyone that doesn't know who Dan Bilzerian is, Dan Bilzerian was like the
modern day Playboy. Yeah.
I think for a long time they called him like the original king of Instagram because he started on social media very early and started essentially documenting like, when you say, imagine a 30-year-old with like, private jet money, that to the extreme, right? Like girls, partying, drugs, private jets, like, and just putting it out there for the world to see. Like his Instagram had a shit ton of followers and it was insane. It was like out of a movie. And he started I don't think it was a CBD company. I think it was literally like a actual cannabis company. And then kind of like disappeared for a while. Like you didn't hear about Dan Bilzerian. And now he started popping up on a bunch of podcasts because I think he's coming out with a book. And I listened to some of the clips and part of an episode. I couldn't really get through the whole thing. It wasn't super interesting. But essentially his thing now is like he's talking to the fact that like that life made him no happier and he thought it did every step of the way. And so it's just interesting because you brought this up now and like as like a very, very public figure, I've seen him, on these podcasts now, like essentially, coming back and saying like, I thought that the girls and the partying and these things and like all these things that money can get me, he made a lot of his money through poker. He's a really accomplished poker player, would like get him some level of fulfillment or happiness. And he just ended up realizing that like, I feel shittier now than I did before I did all this stuff. And now he's like turning a new leaf and like, trying to figure out what actually is going to fulfill him a little more. So it's just interesting that even people like that are seem to be coming to the same realization that you just mentioned.
Yeah, dude, find the right person and burn the boats. Like, I think that analogy is super powerful. And I think that there's always going to be nuance in all this. People are going to be like, well, what if you don't find? It's like, dude, okay. But if you have the mindset, and we talk about this, like if you have the mindset that you found the right person, then burn the boats. And if later on down the line, some crazy thing happens, that's fine. But like at the first taste of like, adversity, like you gotta stick together. Right. And you gotta come together through adversity, because life's going to be hard, man. Life's going to be hard, and you got to find the right person to do life with. And otherwise you're just doing it alone. It's going to be hard either way. So you might as well find somebody you can ride with that's got your back, because it's going to be hard either way. You might as well do it with somebody else.
Yeah. And there's so much like in how life is now and culture is now that just makes it so much harder to stay connected with that person. I remember there was a podcast episode a while back on Chris Williamson. I forget with who it was, but it was around dating and marriages and stuff. And they brought up a really good point. It's just like, there's also this like crazy easy access for infidelity now. And the example that the guest brought up was so interesting, right? It was like before you literally would have to like, sneak around to like, potentially meet like another woman that you would be, unfaithful with. But now like the example she gave, which is so crazy. It's so true. Like you can literally just like reply to a story of like one of the other moms in the moms group of like, hey, nice vacation in Aruba, to like a picture of her in a bikini. And all of a sudden, like that was the example she gave on the podcast. And all of a sudden that leads to these conversations that start getting, go down a route. And next thing you know, it turns into an affair. But like that level of access is like we never had that before, right? Of like being able to like have,
but you'd also be able to track people's phones now. So you have it opposite way too. But I think at the end of the day, man, it's like if somebody wants to cheat, they're going to figure out a way to do it. Yeah, you're right. Like I get it. But I think, something I think about regularly is like, okay, if I found out my wife was ever like having an affair, I should be absolutely shocked. And I should be telling myself every day that I'm doing everything in my power to never let that happen. What's in my control? Making sure that I'm giving her all the things that she needs, so it's not even on the radar. And, that's the only thing that's in your control, right? It's something I think about regularly. I know that's not what you're talking about, but I'm just saying that.
No, but I think that they go hand in hand in that, like, it's kind of like why we're so sick and there's so much obesity and all these things. Like we live in a world now where there's just too much access. Like at the end of the day, you should be disciplined enough, or you should find ways to make sure that you're navigating the world that we live in now, so that you're not having a bunch of junk and not overeating food and exercising enough. Like you should do those things, but we can also acknowledge the fact that like there just wasn't the level of access that there is now to all this junk that there was in the past. And the analogy a little bit there is that like you can connect to so many other like single people, or just people that are just like willing to be unfaithful now than you did in the past. And I think that if you aren't doing the work in the forefront, like you mentioned, to have a strong relationship where infidelity isn't even an option because you have such a strong bond with your partner, if you're not doing that first, there's just so many more opportunities for stuff to go wrong.
Yeah.
But I think, but I completely agree with you though, that like the work starts way before that kind of stuff is even a temptation, by constantly having conversations, by doing things like making sure that like date night is always a non-negotiable. Like I forgot who said this, and it's just so true. Like just never letting your marriage turn into a roommate situation. Like,
yeah, man.
It's like
it's hard as the kids get older, dude. It's hard, right?
Sure. And as they get old, like just having kids
or even younger. Right? Yeah.
Dude, for sure. Like it's something that like we have to now be very, very diligent about dates and alone time, and having time to where like we're not parenting, but we're husband and wife. Like that's what we're doing without the distractions of like the kids are there. Like we're doing, yes, we do still do family time, but finding ways to continue to do that. I mean, I think I mentioned this to you specifically. Like when we had Charlie, our second, and we were just so busy and it was so crazy, like because in the mornings I have to like, I bring Shay from his room to spend a little time with Ariel. And then I grab Charlie like immediately so that she's not dealing with both. Like we try and divide and conquer. Like our good morning kiss was something that we weren't doing anymore. And us making sure that now we like make sure that we do that. Like we still have time for that. It's an extra 2 seconds. The fact that we started doing that because we acknowledge that that's something that we stopped doing just because we're so like busy, like, okay, you take Shay, I'm going to take Charlie. Like it's Monday morning. We have so much things to do before like I have to get on my first call. We both want to work out. Like now making sure that, hey, this is something we have to do. Like that little bit of intentional physical touch has made a huge difference, dude. A huge difference.
Yeah, especially with the way you start the morning off, right?
For sure, man. Like it sets the tone to everything else. Like, in the past, before we had kids or before we had two, like every morning I kiss my wife, good morning. And the fact that that stopped for a while because we had kids, I'm glad that we're like, I'm self-aware enough and we have the conversations to be like, hey, we should start doing that again. But that's I think a really tangible example of how like all those things just start to like fizzle out. And you can easily, you extrapolate that over 2 years. And next thing you know, like that passion's kind of been missing for 2 years. And I can only imagine how hard it is to like try and build that back up, or how tempting it is then to try and find that somewhere else because you haven't done the work to keep that fire burning with the person that you love and made a commitment to. So now, dude, it's super tempting because there's like a million fucking options over here because of the world we live in. All right, we're going to take a quick pause from the podcast here to talk about the Train Hard app and everything we have coming up in the month of August. So we just launched a sand program. So for anyone that's just been on the fence about joining and doesn't quite have the access to the equipment, maybe you don't have the time, the space to dive into Force, Flex, and the other programs that are a part of the Train Hard app, we've taken away all the excuses. We now have a program. It's 10 weeks, 4 workouts per week that require one piece of equipment alone that you can also get right on the Train Hard shop. We are making it so easy. We partnered up with GoRuck. We have their sandbags available on the Train Hard shop. These things are so durable. It's going to last you for years and years. So you should feel good about making the investment with such a versatile piece of fitness equipment that you can also take with you on trips so that you have no excuses and you never let your momentum get to zero. So the SAND program is 10 weeks, 4 workouts per week. There are intervals, there's mixed modal days, there's longer conditioning days, there are short, spicy workouts. You get a little bit of everything so that in those 10 weeks, you can absolutely improve your fitness, improve your conditioning, improve your body composition with a program that's so simple and only requires one piece of equipment. So if you've been on the fence, you now don't have an excuse. Grab the SAND program from the Train Hard shop. It's also available as part of the Train Hard app. So if you're on the Train Hard app and you just want to change things up, boom, you have access to SAND there. We also have a new cycle coming up in Flex that is going to get you so strong. So we have nothing but good things coming here in the month of August. Check out the Train Hard app. Check out the Train Hard shop. Check out the SAND program. Let's get back to the podcast.
Dude, no, I think that's good feedback about the morning kiss thing. I mean, I think that's a good example then of like, let's just say that starts to happen. Then like one person's like, well, we used to do that, but we don't do that anymore. And it's his fault or it's her fault. Like, let's just say, and then you start kind of like in the back of your mind, you're like, well, we don't do that anymore. I think it's because she doesn't want to. And then it like starts creeping in, right? It's like, it starts off creeping in.
Then
yeah, you know what I mean? And it's like, oh, so I think getting in front of it is great, man. Yeah. I mean, look, I've been with Ashley for 23 years, been married for 15. I feel like we could talk with relative level of confidence in what I've experienced, just because we have had to grow. And dude, we've gone through some like legit adversity together. And so I feel like there's a lot of takeaways that we've had, you know, and one of them is exactly what you just said right now, right? Being intentional. So yeah, man, I love it. That's great. Thanks for sharing that.
I have another question for you on this note though. And this is, anything could be controversial nowadays, but this is maybe a little controversial. What role does, even with kids and the craziness, what role does continuing to take care of yourself so that, you know, you don't quote unquote, let yourself go, and also like, you know, just stop being as attractive to your partner? Like what role does that play in being intentional and getting in front of this stuff?
Oof. I will speak from a dad's perspective. I will not, I don't know if I could speak from okay. So here's my opinion. I think that it's your responsibility as a husband, as a father, to be a leader in your house, to lead by example. And if you want your family to live a healthy lifestyle, if you want to be able to protect and provide, which are really important to us, you have to take care of yourself too. And you can't expect your partner to take care of themselves if you're not taking care of yourselves. So I think it starts with you. It starts with you being the embodiment of what you think a healthy individual should be. And if you listen to this podcast, you probably align with Gabe and I, where that individual should be exercising regularly, should be finding ways to improve mentally and physically. And I think that if you're doing that as a husband, I do think that in return, your wife will be more prepared to want to do that with herself as well, because you probably identified a partner who has similar core values. And maybe over time, right, some of those core values might shift. Like maybe she gets pregnant and, coming back after having a baby, it's tough. And I think giving grace is very important. I think the way you talk about things is super important. But ultimately, over time, if you're originally aligned on your core values of living a healthy lifestyle for yourself and for your family, so you could be there till you're 80, 90 years old doing good shit, and you and your wife are on that same page, eventually she'll get back in the gym and doing those things, is, I guess, at a high level, the way I think about that.
No, I like that. I like that too. And that it starts with you, right? Because we've gotten this question in DMs and in question stickers in the past, right? It's like, hey, like, what can I do to encourage? And this isn't like, male to female, female to male. Like, what can I encourage just my partner? What can I do to encourage my partner to start working out a little bit more? Because I'm on this journey. I feel like I'm doing the things. What do I do to get my partner to kind of jump in on those things as well? And I think that, you've mentioned this so many times on the show, and it's seems counterproductive, but it's not pushing people or constantly like, hey, do this, hey, do more, hey, do this, but like focus on yourself and have patience and grace that like they will eventually kind of follow along when they're ready, and then celebrate the fact that they're ready when they're ready and encourage, but try not to, like, hey, you should really work out kind of thing.
Yeah. And I would say that over time, like, let's just say you start to split paths and you're a dad who like really prioritizes health and wellness, and maybe your spouse doesn't, and it's starting to make you feel potentially unattracted to that individual, mentally and physically, right? Because you're seeing them go in a direction that maybe wasn't what you had aligned with, or maybe, and if you're being really honest with yourself as a husband, maybe you weren't on that path. Now you chose to be on the path. Well, just because after 20, 30, 40, 50 years, you chose to be on the path, doesn't mean your spouse is going to be on that same path, because for years you weren't on that path. So you need to give that person time, because you're the one that made the change, not them, right? And so you got to give them some grace and some time there. And I think one way you can have that conversation is that, hey, like, look, we have a buddy of mine. I'll give you like a real life example. A buddy of mine, he has younger twins, and he's in better shape at 55 today than he was at 45, at 35. And I'd even maybe make the argument at 25. He's in better shape at 55 than he is at 25, because he chose to get on the path and stay on the path. And the conversations that him and I are having are about longevity, are about doing things with the kids, are about living, being here for them. And so I think if you want to talk to your spouse, the conversation you should be having is not about how they look. It's about being there for your kids as they get older and being able to be grandparents that can do things with them. I think when you wrap it up like that, it becomes more of a performance lifestyle conversation and less about the way you look. And I think that they feel less attacked, because it isn't an attack. It's more of a mindset shift. Like, hey, we want to be here. Maybe we shouldn't be drinking 50 cocktails a week or whatever. Like, you know what I mean? Like, just thinking through that lens, I think, is more important. Like, hey, look, you've put on 20 pounds. Can we have you cut some weight? Because it's probably not going to go over well.
No. And I really like that. And the other thing that you mentioned in the past that ties into this that I really like too is like, say you find this path by getting into CrossFit, just say as a hypothetical, and you'd love it. And that's like the thing that has gotten you to look better, feel better, and you're going to the CrossFit gym. But like for some reason, which completely understandable, like your partner just isn't into it, has tried it, but like too intimidating, whatever. But she wants to play golf, or she wants to do walks, or she wants to go on hikes. Like, I think it's also like our responsibility, because this is, supposedly our best friend, our partner. Like, it's our responsibility to be flexible with what we're doing, because movement is movement and we're moving in the right direction. and not be so fixated on like, well, this way worked for me and this is how I want you to go on this path, and everything else is like less than. Like, I think that that's where I would imagine some people get caught up in that, and that's also counterproductive. Like, you can do your CrossFit class 3 times a week because that's helping you and that's awesome. But if your partner wants to go on, like, you know, take the kids out on on bike rides or just go for a hike, and that's what they enjoy, like, I think it's also your responsibility to find ways to do both, because at the end of the day, what you're trying to do, to your point, is longevity and just get everyone moving. And eventually that might turn into, hey, they want to start coming to your CrossFit gym that you love so much. But I think that getting fixated on this worked for me, so it should also be the thing that works for you, is something that can trip some people up and might do more harm than good.
Yeah, no, look, I didn't know exactly the direction we were going on this particular episode, but I do think when it comes to training and being on the path and lifestyle, like it's touchy, and just be aware and be intentional in the way you talk and the things you say. And, you know, again, I'm raising my hand as a guy that generally is pretty reactive. I'm generally like, I have attention things, but when it comes to like discussions, especially like big discussions with my wife, I try and look at it through different perspectives and lenses. And I think that's been really helpful for our relationship, you know, and you know, and then putting yourself in check when you're wrong, I think is important. I think that if you've said something or done something or made somebody feel that way, like, you might not have had that intention, but the bottom line is, like, if you made them feel a certain way, like they felt the way they felt, and you obviously, even if it wasn't your intention, you said something or created something that it did make them feel that way. And so for that reason, it's valid. And I think that with your spouse, it's super important to recognize that, like, just fall on the sword and just be like, look, like, for example, Ashley will be like, hey, you made me feel this way, like insecure about this thing. And I'll be like, no, I didn't, or whatever. I mean, I don't do that anymore, but like back in the day, maybe I would have said that, but now it's like, dude, she feels the way she feels. So obviously I did something wrong, like, because I didn't communicate it effectively. So I think when it comes to fitness, you gotta be really careful about that. And then I think what'll happen is too, if you find cool things and they get excited about it, you can even connect even further. You know, Gabe and you know, I've talked about this, like, Ashley's really into golf. I never thought we would play golf together. And sure enough, this upcoming weekend, we're going and playing golf together. And that's something we could do that's even going to connect us even further. So look for those opportunities and have good perspective. That's my takeaway.
Yeah. Since this episode is turning into like
we got to talk about the jiu-jitsu thing we talked about last episode, by the way.
Yeah. One more question though. One more question on this marriage thing. Cause I selfishly, I mentioned this in the past, man, but like, I selfishly, like, I appreciate this show so much because from the guests and also conversations I have with you, I feel like it's such a cheat code on so many things that, I mean, I'm lucky that I'm literally getting these, you know, prior to 5 years being married, and like, you know, I have kids that are super young. So I feel like I'm thinking about these things really early on. So I'm at a good place, but that's why I love having this conversation. But my last question was this: Nick Freitas on that episode, which again, people should check out, brought another thing up that I thought was really interesting. So being completely honest, like the, you know, 2 under 2, like these last 3 months have been challenging. Like they've been stressful, and have definitely like tested me and Ariel's relationship in ways that we haven't been tested before, because we're both doing a lot. We're both under a lot of stress. We're not getting the best sleep. It's a lot. And it's obviously like, I wouldn't have done it any other way. And I'm so happy that we're at where we're at, but it hasn't been easy. And one of the things that we've talked about recently is when we do disagree about something and we're having these, like, I wouldn't even call them arguments, but they're definitely like heated discussions about something. She thinks A, I think B. We were talking about like, because usually I'm a big like, hey, we disagree on this. Like, let's talk it out now. Like, let's figure it out now. And she's more of like, wants to think about it and talk about it later. And so even the fact that we both approach conflict in those different ways creates another like level of conflict to the conflict. But we were talking about specifically, like, do we have these conversations in front of the kids? Shay specifically. He doesn't understand really what's going on yet, but he definitely, you can tell, like, doesn't like the fact that, like, you know, we're like, our voices are a little raised, and like, it never is disrespect. Like, no one's ever yelling at each other, but like, you know, like Nick said, like, you know, marriage isn't just sunshine and rainbows. I'm sure you know this too. Like, it's not like you're always agree on everything. So we were, you know, had made this decision of like, hey, we're like, if anything needs like a heated discussion or whatever, we have to wait until we're not around the kids. But then Nick had brought up in the episode, and I thought this was a really, really interesting take, how he never like shied away from having those like heated disagreements with his wife in front of the kids, because he wanted to show to them that like, this is what marriage is. Like, marriage is sometimes having a disagreement with the person you love. And like, I will always talk to your mom as the woman that I love, and I'll have the disagreements with utmost respect, but sometimes we have disagreements and we have to hash it out. And he wants them to know that that's a very natural part of marriage, but also to know that no matter how heated this discussions get, like going back to the burn the boats conversation, like we're not going anywhere. This thing isn't like, it's not affecting this bond that we have, but we're not going to agree on everything. So my question is, what's your opinion? Where do you fall on these things happening in front of the kids versus behind closed doors? And obviously, before you answer, like there's obviously a line. There's obviously like things that should absolutely be behind closed doors just because they're either super heated or the topic that they're about. But for the most part, are you avoiding having any sort of disagreement or like more heated debate with Ashley in front of the kids? Like, are you intentional about like, we'll talk about that later? Or is it like, hey, we're a family, this is what we do, we're obviously not going anywhere, so it's all fair game?
By the way, I thought what Nick said was really powerful there too, because it also shows the girls in particular, or it shows his kids that like, it's okay to get in some type of like argument. And then it doesn't mean that if there's a conflict, like all of a sudden mom and dad are gone, right? Like it just shows like conflict's okay in a respected way. And also he mentioned, which I completely subscribe to this, like showing that affection too. Like, so the way Ash and I would say is like, I mean, I'm not just saying this because on the podcast, like we don't really, I'd say that the only time we have like really serious conversations, and maybe it's because Ash and I over the last while have had to have some really serious conversations about like the health and wellness of our children. I feel like that's the only thing that we have that are like kind of like a little bit like deeper conversations. Like we, for the most part, we align with most things. I'd say there's been some times where we do kind of like have conversations about like money related stuff in front of the kids. And I'd say that that's the one thing, like we might like disagree on money stuff, and we will have that in front of the kids. I think it's important for them to realize like people come to it with different vantage points, and we could talk it through, because they're also a part of this family, and they need to recognize like money, it shouldn't run your world, but it is an important piece. And so we do have those conversations, but when it comes to like the health and well-being of the children, we typically do that offline because we're talking about one of the kids, right? But we definitely in front of the kids show a lot of like, I don't tone down or ramp up my affection to Ashley. It's just neutral all the time. So, Ava will give me like that look like, cause she's 13. She doesn't want to see her dad, like, grabbing her mom's butt or whatever. But like, that's just the way it is. Like, I'm going to show affection the same way, but I'm also we're going to have conversations the same way, unless it has to do with the kids, then we take it offline.
I love that, man. I love that.
Yeah. But that's most of the conversations we're having, right? It is about the kids. It's funny now that I think about it, like, yeah, most of them are like, where do we spend? What do we prioritize? And, the children. So yes, that's what I got on that.
Yeah. That was the other thing that Nick said that I really liked, right? Is like, when he said that like a friend of one of his kids was like, hey man, like, I wish my parents flirted the way that your parents flirt. And I was like, oh, you want to be those parents. You want to be the ones that flirt.
Dude, growing up, my buddy, shout out to Joe Kuntz. I know that there's people listening to this that know who Joe Kuntz is. His parents, dude, his dad was like this, like good looking, jacked. And his mom was very beautiful. And they were high school sweethearts, and you could just tell when they were together, like there's a lot of love. Like it wasn't like they were making out with each other in front of the kids. You could just tell like there's a lot of like good energy between the two of them. And dude, I remember here I am all these years later. And I remember in high school, whenever I went over there, it exuded to me like, hey, that's a relationship goal. And here I am, I was like a 15-year-old, jerk of a, pimple faced kid. And I was like, wow, I want to be like that one day, So that's what we're trying to do.
That's what we're trying to do, man. All right, but tell me about this guy. I'm really curious about this story. Tell me about this guy at the Origin camp.
There's always. So the Origin camp is 5-day long jiu-jitsu. And so you have morning, afternoon, and evening sessions of jiu-jitsu. So it's a lot of jiu-jitsu. I actually bit my lip, which is maybe why I have more of a lisp than usual. Dude, so I roll a lot. And you know who's a badass? Andy Stumpf. Andy Stumpf hosts a Clear Hop podcast, which, by the way, we need to talk to him about getting him on the show, is a total badass. This guy, dude, I watched him in the middle of the ring, just guy after guy after guy would ask him to roll, and he would just boom, boom, boom. So one night, I'm no gi, and throughout the week, one of the things that I've had to really come to terms with is that a lot of people that go there, they see us on the internet and they see us as like these figureheads for whatever reason, right? Like because I'm on the internet and there's videos of me. And so there's one guy at night, it was probably 10:30 at night. And I remember this distinctly. Like I had probably had 10 or 15 other guys roll with every 5-minute rounds, right? So at this point, dude, it's late. I'm pretty tired. And this guy walks up to me. He's like, you want to roll? He's like a pretty big guy, like no-gi. And I'm like, I just look at him. I was like, okay. So I go and I sit in my like open guard. It's like kind of lay down, like low key, like casual. And his buddy pulls out his cell phone. And I'm like, oh, here we go. Right. It's just like, it's like verbatim. Like, you know what's going to happen. And this guy just fucking comes in with all the pressure. Right. I'm like, okay. And it comes off at first like, and I've had to like really do some reflection on this because I put myself in that position, right? Like I know that I have like this public figure-ish. I'm intentionally on the mats and I'm saying yes to the role. So like I need to do a better job of like checking my ego and whatever. But at the same time, right? If you go the other way, this guy made me feel like he was trying to hurt me because of how aggressive he was. And I don't think he was trying to hurt me, but the way he was so aggressive, I think it was just like a buildup. Like he thinks he wants to show me how good he is or how strong he is. And so, dude, I was like, fuck, man. I was like, bro, you got to calm down. So it just wouldn't really happen. So I got on top of my.
You said that?
Yeah. And so I put my stomach right in his face and I mounted him and I looked at his camera and I just looked at the camera. I was just like, just gave like a shrug. Like, what are we doing here? Like, come on, guys. Like, and it was just a really good example for me of two things. Number one is that next year when I put myself in that same position, I need to do a better job of not getting frustrated because I'm doing that to myself. Like I need to know that people are going to come at me like that and I need to handle it with more grace. Because I didn't. I was just like, fuck you. And I got on top of him and put my stomach in his face. Right. And the other is people need to be more aware of like, dude, just like, hey man, let's just have some good rolls and let's not trying to show each other just how like strong and crazy we are. Those were my two big takeaways, but I don't know if that video will show up on the internet, but if it does, it'll be me smothering this guy, looking up at his camera, just like shrugging, like, what are we doing? Like, what are we doing here? Anyways, you had to be there, I guess.
How did no, this is super interesting. How did the interaction end after that?
The timer ended and it was just like,
but he just like went about his way. Like, was anything said?
No, nothing was said. I mean, and so that's the thing, right? Is like, I mean, I rolled with probably 30 different people and this happened a few times, but this one in particular just like kind of got underneath my skin a little bit because of the cell phone. I think that's the part that kind of like,
sure.
But again, if I'm taking extreme ownership here, I'd say, well, bro, maybe this guy's just fired up, wants to get in a roll, wants to have this for like his, like, for himself. But I can't help but think this guy's trying to do something to me so that he could put on the internet and say that he tapped Jason Khalipa. You know what I mean? It's just, anyways, a lot of lessons for me happen there because, it's good to put yourself out there. But if I'm going to put myself out there, I need to approach it and stay calmer because I did feel myself start to get a little bit like mad, and you shouldn't be mad when you're rolling jiu-jitsu. Like that was a good ego check for me.
Got it. I mean,
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, so for me as kind of an outsider of this, listening to the story, it sounds like you probably like reacted exactly how anyone would and checked yourself well before doing anything that like was quote unquote uncalled for. And what I'm assuming is like the unwritten rules here are if or if there's any doubt that you are not at someone's level in the sport and they're giving you the time or like, okay with rolling with you, you should approach that in a way where you're more open to the experience and open to learn and it being a good training partner. And then if you know that you're better than someone or more high skilled than someone, then that kind of goes without saying. Like no one, a black belt would never do that to you is
No.
kind of what I'm getting at. Like someone that's been in the game for a long time would never approach you in that way. It's going to be someone that's below. And then the unwritten rule there is like, dude, if you're below, like show a little respect and don't like, go out there trying to hurt someone.
Yeah. And it's really, that's a great way to summarize it, because I mean, watching Andy Stump just mop some people up was like one of the most entertaining things I've seen in a long time. I mean, so Andy Stump, he's 200 and something pounds. He's a big dude. He's a black belt. He's good, right? Good jiu-jitsu practitioner. And him and I had some great roles and it was all good. But dude, just watching him in the middle of the match, just one after another was so entertaining. But I think that's a great way to put it, man, is like, it's just, I think what it is, I would encourage. So I roll with this guy, Bushesha, who is there, who's by far one of the best ever in jiu-jitsu ever. And, you just got to know your place. Like, I'm not going to beat you. He's at like 10% of his ability. And I know that. And he knows that. But if I'm trying to like be like overly aggressive, it's just not going to end well for anybody, because he's going to be like, dude, you're being a dick. And I'm not going to get anything out of it because he's not going to let me work. And so it's just, it's one of the rare examples, Gabe, that I could think of, because unlike CrossFit, for years, people would come to the gym and they would challenge me in different things, right? Whatever it is, like a workout here and there. And it never really bothered me, because it's not like they're physically trying to make you feel like they're going to hurt you. Mm-hmm. I think the reason why jiu-jitsu is something I've had to reflect on is that in the wrong context, it could throw you off a little bit, right? In CrossFit, it's not that same way.
For sure. No. Did you feel bad when I beat you in the open?
You didn't beat me in the open.
I beat you in one of the open workouts.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. No, but like stuff like that, it's a fun, like bullshit and whatever, right? Like, but when it comes to combative
I just want to bring that up as many times.
Yeah. Yeah. And maybe guys who are, maybe guys who are like really good in combative sports probably have better perspective on this than I do, only because they've been in the game for so long. But for me, I've been in jiu-jitsu for a while, but it's not like I'm like world-class jiu-jitsu practitioner. I just train hard and I love to get after it. I'm not world-class at all. And so maybe I haven't been as used to it. And so I just gotta, I don't know. I gotta, my key takeaway for myself is never get mad on the mats. Never get mad on the mats. You should never be mad on the mats. And I found myself getting frustrated. Not like, I mean, dude, I'm not like a mad kind of guy, but I shouldn't have even gotten frustrated. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. And that's a great lesson that applies to so many other areas in life, right? Like just the whole, if you put yourself in a situation, you can't get frustrated over it because you put yourself in that situation, even if it's someone else that's approaching it in the wrong, which like, I think objectively, anyone kind of hearing the story would be like, the guy shouldn't have done that, right? Like that's kind of like what you would call like a dick move. Like don't do that. But either way, like it's better to not get frustrated by it or not let it frustrate you is kind of the lesson there.
Yeah, for sure. And so now, again, I'll just take this moving forward. That's all. Like good takeaway and learn from it for next time. That's all.
When you're at a camp like this, when are you going super hard? Are you going super hard when you're like super evenly matched with someone and you're really trying to like test yourself? Are you going super hard when you're like, with someone that's like super, super advanced and you're kind of trying to see like, what can you do past them? Obviously you're not going super, super hard with someone that doesn't have the skill level of strength as you, because then you can hurt them. But when, if any time during the Origin camp, were you like, this is me at like as close to I'm in a tournament trying to win type of approach? Or does that not happen at all in a setting like that?
I don't think it would even happen. And if I'm being really upfront, I think that, at GoRuck event was probably Shanji. Remember him?
Mm-hmm.
He really kind of like set my mindset for the camp, which was like, so Shanji would grab my lapel and I would break it and kind of break it a little bit aggressively. And he's like, bro, you don't need to break it like that. Like, break it nice and easy, or don't even break it at all, and see where can you go if I had this grip, and finding different channels. And so I try to take that approach to the camp. I would say that in general, I went the hardest with guys that were, black belts who I knew could, grapple hard. And there was a few guys I went no-gi with. That's always like the speed is just so much faster. But I'd say in general, what I'm trying to get to in my game today is not reverting to current paths that I feel comfortable with, but trying to say, okay, someone has me in a position. I feel confident I could muscle them out of this. But what other options do I have? And that's what I've tried to like, for me to improve my game, I got to do it, man. I got to get there. And it's hard. It's hard, especially at a camp, because you need to allow people to get in better positions on you, but you're never going to get better at that position unless you expose yourself to them. And I need to be better about that, you know, especially with people I don't know. Like, I think at your own gym, it's okay. Cause like, there's kind of like, you know, like that guy knows that, hey, I could do this, but I'm not. Right. In a camp, you don't know anything about it. And so I think I need to humble myself more and put myself in different positions with different people if I ever want to be able to actually be able to do that, you know?
Is there any type of like conversation before a roll that happens where you guys are discussing, like, I've heard the term flow roll thrown around. I know that that's from context, genuinely like, hey, you're just going to like, you know, different positions, like you're kind of going easy. You're not trying to like, what does that look like specifically to like what you pointed out? You're at a camp, like these people don't know you, you don't know them. Or is it more like, I see the belt you're wearing, I see how big you are, and then you're kind of using that context to like make the decision of how you're going to approach it?
I think you're adjusting your intensity based on their intensity. And so that's where things can escalate quickly. But I'd say in general, just to kind of highlight at this particular camp, I think most people are there and they're like, I think everybody is there to learn and to get better at jiu-jitsu. It's just hard because it's hard to check your ego when you're in that environment, dude. They have like Portuguese music playing. You got 100 dudes on the mat at 10:30 at night. It's fucking sick, dude. It's badass. And so you have to tell yourself, hey, work within my own parameters, make sure that I'm getting better and I'm being a good training partner. And so that's what I would say. I think the Origin camp is like phenomenal. And I was honored to be able to go there and teach the fitness side. I did not teach jiu-jitsu. But we had a lot of people show up to work strength and conditioning for on the mats by training off the mats. And I talked about our new SAND program, or at this point, it's not even new, but I talked about our SAND program.
Yeah. Cool, man. It sounds awesome. The story's funny. I really hope we had access to that video. That'd be fun to watch.
It'd be so funny, dude, if that video pops up. Just like the look, I was like, if it pops up, it'd be funny. Hey, you know who I met there? Jack Osborne. Do you know Ozzy Osbourne?
Sure.
Yeah, his son rolls jiu-jitsu.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. And we got Justin, actually, he's part of Denver SWAT. He did his first burpee after 14 months. And that was a good example of like trying to like balance, you know, so he lost his foot or like the bottom, like below his knee in a fire engine accident, where he was playing security for, not playing security. He was security for a big event. It must've been like a giant event. There's like millions of people. And so he had his foot and the bottom of his, you know, below his knee ran over. And so he hadn't been able to do jiu-jitsu for a little bit. And so this is a jiu-jitsu camp. So I was like, hey, I'll work out with you. And he ended up getting his first burpee, which if you didn't watch that video, I put up on my Instagram. So make sure to check that one out. So it's a cool story about a guy who's like pushing hard to get back, and he's back to work. It's awesome.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
It sounds like such a cool experience, and Maine looks beautiful. Getting check out like the Origin factory and stuff. I love what those guys are doing.
Dude,
maybe I'll tag along next year.
Dude, the Origin company, man, they're the real deal. Like, I'm telling you, like, if you listen to this podcast and you think that we try and share authentic messages, I think we do. I know we do. And Origin, like, yeah, their stuff might not be the cheapest, but I'll tell you straight up, it is 100% American made by people in the state of Maine and other states. And when you watch and you go to the factory, it's worth the money because of the quality you're going to get, especially in like the hard goods, like the boots and stuff like that. And all their other training gear is great as well. So make sure to check out Origin for a great company.
Yeah, no, super cool stuff.
Cool, man. Well, dude, I appreciate you, jumping on, riffing about marriage. And then obviously I'll talk a little bit about jiu-jitsu. It's been the last couple of weeks have been pretty exciting with the CrossFit Games, the dive, which we shared last week. And then obviously what's going on this last week. And yeah, man, you're coming out this way. So I'm sure we'll be getting a lot of content when you're out in the great state of California here pretty soon.
Yeah, dude, I'm excited. It's going to be fun.
All right. Well, hey, appreciate you guys for checking out the podcast. As per usual, simple ask. If you got value from our conversation on marriage, or maybe just got some entertainment about the jiu-jitsu conversation, simple ask. Share this podcast with a friend. It helps the podcast. helps us, grows the message, which is ultimately our long-term goal. Keep training hard.